Well, hello again. Thank you for coming back to the channel. As you can see, we have here the PM2, and we are going to be doing a full review after having carried this guy for quite a while now. First thing to get out of the way, I have to say, I think this might be my favorite knife currently. I don't say that lightly because, as you may have heard if you've watched my previous two videos with Spydercos, the unboxing for this and the unboxing for my Manix 2 Lightweight, Spydercos were never something that I was really all that interested in the past. The aesthetics and especially with the military, paramilitary, and kind of like those tenacious lines, the sort of spy versus spy look to the blade never really appealed to me at all. It wasn't until I got this guy in hand that I had any sort of love for this knife. Biggest thing for me is just the ergos. It feels so good in my hand. And I really can't stress that enough. If you're on the fence about these because of aesthetics, pick one up. I don't know if I would necessarily say pick up a tenacious or one of those lines because I haven't handled those yet. But if you got the funds to give a Para 3 or a PM2 a try, do it. These knives are incredible for use for comfort, for fidgetability, and just as an EDC knife, it is incredible. I can't say anything else. Wonderful, fantastic. The praise that I can give this is just, it's top notch. So I've carried this for, I wouldn't say a month straight. I've had it for about a month and a half, and I have carried it quite a bit. Not as much as I might have liked because I've been working on these scales. As you can see, you probably haven't seen scales like this on a PM2 too much before. I've seen a couple Reddit posts of people doing resin scales or 3D printed scales, but I would say that in the entire few months that I've been on Reddit, I've seen like 2 posts for anything that hasn't been like a Flytanium, or something in like a micarta or G10. So the scales here are something that I'm trying to bring to market. I'm still having a little bit of an issue with production process as well as nailing down the actual material. One of the issues that I've been having is keeping the blade centered. So far with the materials that I've used, the resins that I've used, they're not quite hard enough to resist a little bit of deformation from the screws. So over time, the blade has been migrating over to the side, and with this specific set, you can maybe, it's kind of hard to tell, but the scales themselves aren't entirely flat, and so you can tell like here at the end, they do stick up a bit off of the liner. So I'm still working out some issues, but this is something that I'm really excited about because I'm going to be able to get some really cool looks. As you can see, this sort of cloudy look, the closest thing that you can really get right now to something like this is going to be like fat carbon scales. And even then, not really. Like there's some G Mascis scales out there, but it's still not going to have quite the same flowy feel to it. Now, obviously, these are extremely shiny at the moment with that gloss finish from just the pure resin on top. But I do have a pair of scales, and this one does fit a bit better, that I went ahead and hit with some, I believe I did 600 grit sandpaper on these ones. And I really like not only how it feels, but how it looks. It's got, you know, a little bit more of a matte finish to it, but it feels nice. They are somewhat slick feeling when your fingers are dry, but if you get any sort of sweat, oil, water on your fingers, they stick nice. So while they're smooth, they are still surprisingly grippy. One of the issues that I am also dealing with right now is I haven't bothered to get a vacuum chamber yet, so I've been having a little bit of an issue with degassing these, and then also making sure that there's no bubbles getting trapped in the mold when I create these. But currently, I'm still figuring out what material I want. This resin that I've been using is, a little flexy, which I think is leading to some of those issues with the blades staying centered and the screws sort of settling in and needing to be retightened over time. As you can see with the stock G10 scales, they're stiff. It's hard to bend those, whereas with a similar amount of pressure, you're getting a lot more deflection on this. So I'm still doing some research and trying to figure out what final material I want to go with. But if anybody is interested in trying any of these out, I would be willing to send a few pairs out to people for some testing, just to see how they feel about it, for like a lighter use scale. And for that, just leave a comment and I'll get in touch with you, and I'll probably just charge you for shipping to give that a try. But these are fiberglass reinforced, and I think that may be part of the testing and research that I need to do, is deciding what type of fiberglass to be using. Currently, I'm using a milled fiberglass powder, basically, which has an average strand size of a 32nd of an inch, and I believe that might be a little too powdery overall for proper stiffening. It does make them a lot more durable to cracking and everything, but it's not helping as much as I would have liked for stiffness. So I think I may look into getting some in more like a 1/16 or 1/8 inch average strand length, but we'll have to see on that. That may be the key that I'm looking for as well, that would allow this to do. But anyway, let's get back to the PM2 itself. I was not excited about or happy with the stock clip, so I did go ahead obviously and pick up an MXG clip here. This is a titanium clip that I did a little bit of a lightning anodize on, or lightning heat coloring on, since it's not truly anodizing. And that alone greatly improved the comfortability of the knife while using it, as well as just the carry profile in general. Obviously with the deep carry clip, it carries deep. With the stock clip, you're looking at about, the lanyard tube's bottom as where your pocket comes up to. And so it really does stick out from the pocket quite a bit. Is that a huge issue? No, but I do like to be a little bit more discreet with my knife. And so this deep carry clip has been an awesome addition. It also, like I said, improves the comfortability while using it. I won't say that the stock clip is uncomfortable, but you feel it. You really do feel it in your hand. And this one, it just melts away. It's still there, like you can tell it's there, but it's not uncomfortable at all, and it doesn't create any sort of hot spotting. So that I really do like. If you are picking up a PM2, I would recommend picking up one of these MXG clips, or if you're running with just a stock clip, this MXG one is incredible. I do want to say thank you to a YouTube commenter on my previous video. They're the ones that turned me on to MXG. Initially, I'd been looking at a Lynch Northwest, and while I can't compare the two because I haven't tried Lynch Northwest, I can wholeheartedly recommend this MXG clip. Came with the hardware, the stainless steel hardware, and it also did come with some extended length screws as well, so that if you do want to get some slightly thicker scales, I think some of the aftermarket micarta scales are a bit thicker than the stock ones, you'll still be able to use that clip with those scales, because I think that the stock screws won't necessarily go through some of those thicker aftermarket scales. this knife is insanely fidgetable. It is so fun to play with. One of the aesthetic things that I was a little hesitant about with the Spydercos was the hole. Not that I really thought that it was going to be an issue with like strength or anything like that, but it just it looked a little funky, especially because the size of the hole on the PM2 here gives that huge hump. But again, in terms of ergonomics, that hump lets you lock in so well, especially if you're choking up into the choil up here. This is such a solid knife in the hand, and I can't recommend it enough, especially for a little bit harder use. If you're going to go with, titanium scales, the G10, eventually I'd like my scales to be strong enough to hold up to super hard use. But at the moment, with that little bit of deformation that I'm getting over time, I can't 100% recommend them if you're really using your knife hard. But man, so fidgetable. The hole allows you to slow roll it, allows you to thumb flick it, allows the patented Spidey flick, which is probably my favorite way to open this. And along with the hole, the compression lock is just, it's flawless. It locks up super tough. Right now I got a little bit of, just a tiny bit of side-to-side blade play since I don't have that pivot super tightened down. Yeah, I do like that nice drop shut closure, but man, the compression lock is, it's so easy to manipulate. I've seen some comments and some YouTube reviews talking about how you don't get a lot of purchase on the handle while manipulating that, and I don't agree. You get plenty. Currently with this, with kind of sweaty hands, it's a little warm in the room here, and the gloss finish on these scales, it's a little slippery and doesn't feel quite as secure in the hand as the G10 does, or these more, I want to call it sort of, it's not satin, but it's sort of probably going to end up calling this finish like velvet or something kind of pretentious like that. I do like slightly pretentious names for things. But I don't feel like I'm going to drop the knife when I'm manipulating that lock. Whether it's hard to open with the wrist flick with the camera where it's at. But anyway, this knife is super fidgetable along with just being a great user knife. This one is in 20CV, which is my first time having, one of the, call it super high-end steels, like 20CV 204P M390, and I'm not sure how I feel about it at the moment. It doesn't seem to hold an edge quite as well as I thought it would. And I don't know if this just was a little bit of a bad heat treat. I don't know if it's the geometry that I've got on here, but so far it has been seeming to dull a little quicker than what I imagined. That being said, the dulling that I'm noticing is more so in the shave sharpness of the edge. So like right now, it's fairly freshly stropped and sharpened, and it is crazy sharp. Like it just pops those hairs off your arm with no pressure against the skin. You're not scraping anything off. You are truly shaving with how it is right now. That being said, if I were to use this for even just an hour or two, breaking down just a few boxes, it's not going to shave that same way, but it will still just glide through cardboard. So shaving edge goes relatively quickly, at least on the knife that I have here. The working edge and being able to pass through, harder materials and just keep on trucking, it has seemed to be extremely good. So I don't know if that's just, a little bit of misunderstanding, if you want to call it that, on my part, with what people are talking about when they say 20 CV has insanely good edge retention, but it's in my experience still so far still a fantastic steel. I really can't say too much bad about it at all. Overall, I gotta say I think this is currently my favorite knife. It is a little bit of a toss-up between this and the Actinon Verba here, mostly just because this is in LMAX, and the LMAX so far seems to sharpen a little bit nicer and strop a little bit nicer than the 20 CV. It doesn't seem to last as long, but it's definitely doing an incredible job of being a great everyday carry. The other thing too is this knife just seems to disappear in my pocket a little bit better. I do think that that's partly because of the carry profile and being about a half an inch slimmer in this direction. And then I do like how deep this wire clip carries, because the entire knife does just disappear into your pocket. But this is not nearly as fidgetable of a knife. I like having the the deployment options are very similar between the two. But this feels, with only having the single side thumb stud, it doesn't feel as fidgetable as the PM2 with being able to, flick, and lock, flick it. You can obviously do that with the Axis style lock here, but overall I do prefer this, but really just a smidge. I would say that while this has been assembled and not disassembled for scale making and testing, I've been carrying this one a little bit more, but they are about even. So I can highly recommend both of these knives for an everyday carry. Aftermarket on the PM2 is saturated, kind of, to say the least. There's a ton of people making scales. There's a ton of people making clips. There's a ton of people doing titanium hardware, etc. So if you're looking for a knife that you can just mod up yourself, even if you're not going to be making your own mods, it's insane what you can do with this knife. You can really make it yours. And just the vast number of sprint runs that they have in various handle materials, handle colors, and steels, you can't go wrong with picking one of these up. Yeah, they're a little pricey at basically $175 minimum. You can get some deals here and there with coupon codes and sales, but it's definitely not a cheap knife. That being said, I do feel that even though it's fairly expensive, it is worth every penny, especially if you're getting one in the more exotic steels that they have available on the sprint runs. I'm not a huge fan of S30V overall, although, to be fair, the only knife that I have in S30V is my mini bug out here, and it does get extremely sharp. It's just not my favorite on the stones, and even less of a favorite for me is S35VN. Although the main, or the new stock steel for the PM2 is S45VN. I do not have any experience with that steel so far. It's supposed to last a little bit longer edge retention wise than the S35VN, and I don't know how it compares for sharpening, but I do not like sharpening the S35VN on the Ferrum Forge there. So something to keep in mind. Maybe keep an eye out for one of the M4 or Crewwear PM2s, but as a knife overall, cannot recommend it enough, even though it's on the upper end of what I am willing to spend on a knife right now. So I think I've covered all the main things. I really don't have any gripes about this. I would say my only problem with this knife was the fact that it did have some pretty darn insane lock stick when I first got it. That being said, I think that that's due primarily to it being a mass-produced knife and this being a coated blade with coated liners. I want to say that that does mess with the, I mean, even just the super, super thin coating that's on the blade, I want to say is enough with how tight tolerances are on a knife like this to cause that issue. Once I gave it a couple disassemblies and cleaned things up a bit, polished the washers in there, and just gave it a ton of fidgeting, that problem has entirely disappeared, whether I have the stock scales on the knife or whether I have some of my scales on the knife. So, like I said, cannot recommend this knife enough. If you've been thinking about it and have been on the fence for whatever reason, ignore that reason and buy one. This is fantastic. It's incredible, and it's well worth the money despite the relatively high price point. So, thanks for tuning in, as always, and we will catch you guys next time.